The history of transportation systems in the city of Boston. Boston was one of the most famous and well-known cities in America. It was first settled in 1630 by a group of Puritans from England. The city has been the location to some of the most historically significant events in American history. It has also been the site to some of the most important innovations in transportation systems in our country. The earliest transportation systems in Boston were ferries. These vessels sailed up and down the Charles River and through the harbor, connecting Boston to surrounding communities. This is considered the first chartered transportation service on the North American continent. For many years, it was the most efficient way to travel around New England. Following the American Revolution, the city of Boston experienced a massive increase in population. As a result, new infrastructure, including bridges and modes of transportation, were developed in order to get people from Boston to the suburbs like Cambridge and Charlestown. Stagecoaches were used to carry small groups of people to specific places, while the omnibus allowed the transportation of many people to several stops along specific routes. Years later, Boston began to experiment with the idea of rail cars. Many cities at the time had a rail car system that were powered by cables. However, city officials in Boston were skeptical that they could perform in the harsh New England winters. Instead, they decided to try to install an electric car system, something that had only been attempted in a few cities. In 1889, the first electric cars began service. Ultimately, this went on to become one of the most efficient and successful electric car systems in the country. Over the next couple of decades, the increase of streetcars and other traffic began to inundate the streets of Boston. This made it difficult for commuters who lived in the suburbs to get into the city for work. However, it was expensive and challenging to build new lines, and people were overwhelmingly unsatisfied. As a result, the Boston Elevated Railway Company began to build elevated railways throughout the city and the country's first subway in 1897. In the 1960s and 70s, projects to improve mass transit throughout the greater Boston area were at an all-time high. The Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority provided all forms of public transportation, including bus routes, trolleys, ferries, light rail, and commuter rails. Today, Boston has one of the largest, most efficient mass transit systems in the country. It reaches 176 towns and cities in eastern Massachusetts from Newburyport to Plymouth. On average, 1.3 million passengers will use the system on a typical weekday. The top map is a map of the entire commuter rail and subway system, and the bottom picture is